Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tracking down a corporate ghost. A company almost everyone recognizes, but almost everyone completely misunderstands. If you ask a random person on the street about Nokia, they're probably going to picture that indestructible brick phone from the early 2000s. Or they'll just assume the brand died a long time ago. But the reality is far more cynical and vastly more profitable. The company everyone thinks is dead? They didn't die at all. Instead, they quietly evolved into the invisible landlord of the internet, practically owning the very plumbing that connects our modern world.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly did a seemingly dead phone brand pull off one of the greatest corporate magic tricks in history? It's a pretty fantastic irony. Today, Nokia is absolutely not a consumer brand. You are not going to find their latest gadget on a Best Buy shelf. But while they don't make consumer phones anymore, they are making absolute billions, selling the technology and the infrastructure that powers global networks. We're talking everything from fiber connections to the software behind modern connectivity. And when I say billions, I literally mean billions. After resetting their entire corporate strategy, the business didn't just stabilize, it exploded with staggering numbers. In 2021, this supposedly dead company reported $26.3 billion in net sales and $2.6 billion in operating profit. That's a profit margin of around 10%. They definitively proved that their cynical, seemingly desperate corporate reinvention actually worked out brilliantly. But to understand how they pulled off this pivot, we kind of have to look at their DNA. Section 1. 160 Years of Survival and the Hubris Trap. Their history is a literal masterclass in survival. Reinvention isn't just a strategy Nokia tried once, it's baked right into their 160-year run. Get this, they didn't even start in tech. They were founded way back in 1865 as a Finnish paper mill. From there, they expanded into rubber, then cables, then electronics. By 1981, they helped launch the world's first multinational cellular network, and by the year 2000, they completely dominated the global market, moving nearly a third of all mobile phone sales. It is a wildly incredible leap to go from grinding wood pulp to dominating global telecommunications.
And man, that dominance drove some extraordinary growth. At their absolute peak, Nokia was valued at more than $290 billion. They were Europe's most valuable company, holding an unthinkable 40% market share. But here is the trap. Winning the game for that long bred a highly toxic culture of overconfidence at the top. It got to the point where simply holding a Nokia business card meant you could get a meeting with a president or prime minister whenever you wanted. That level of power creates absolute, blinding hubris. Which leads us straight into a brick wall in 2007. Enter the Apple iPhone. When the smartphone era officially kicked off, Nokia's top management knew the specs, but they just brushed it off. They literally thought, yeah, it's interesting, but we're going to be fine. Now imagine being in middle management at that moment. They were terrified. They saw the reality, but because of the culture, they started to embellish their communications, making overly optimistic promises and completely distorting their reporting. The result? Pure corporate gaslighting. The top execs were kept entirely under the illusion that Nokia's own response to the iPhone was just about ready to launch. Spoiler alert, it wasn't.
And this brilliantly illustrates the fallout of that illusion. Between 2007 and 2012, their mobile phone revenues suffered a violent, catastrophic collapse, plummeting from more than $36 billion to just over $20 billion. Their share price evaporated right alongside it, leaving them at their lowest valuation in decades. The company that basically defined the mobile phone era was suddenly drowned.
Section 2. Selling the sinking ship. So what do you do when the ship goes down? In 2013, Nokia made a highly publicized, dramatic decision. They pawned off their dying handset business to Microsoft for more than $7 billion. Now, the media played this as a tragic defeat at the time, but looking back, it was a ruthless, highly profitable escape hatch. Because while their phones were vanishing from store shelves, behind the scenes, Nokia still had decades of hardcore telecom network expertise and a massive patent portfolio. So they used that Microsoft buyout cash to fund a massive infrastructure pivot, kicking it off by buying out Siemens to bring a massive joint venture entirely in-house. Then, in 2016, they executed an absolute masterstroke. Nokia dramatically expanded its footprint by buying Alcatel-Lucent for a staggering 15.6 billion euros. This wasn't just them getting bigger, it was a fundamental evolution of the company. This massive purchase gave them optical and fixed networks. Suddenly, Nokia wasn't just a wireless player. They had transformed into a broad, heavily diversified telecom superpower, operating across fundamentally different layers of global infrastructure.
That single acquisition catapulted Nokia straight into the top tier of global telecom equipment providers, grabbing them roughly 24% of the market share. Think about that. By coldly walking away from a consumer smartphone war they were obviously losing, they successfully entrenched themselves as the foundational builders of the networks those very smartphones needed just to function.
Section 3. The Invisible Landlord's Tollbooth. Now, what's really interesting about this breakdown is exactly how they're generating revenue today. They totally diversified away from relying on a single vulnerable consumer gadget. Instead, they make money across multiple layers of global connectivity. You've got the massive chunk of their business, which is networks, physically building the mobile and broadband infrastructure. Then there's cloud and network services. But that third slice, that is the real secret weapon: patents.
Nokia is currently sitting on an inescapable high-margin cash cow, a massive portfolio of more than 26,000 patent families. And we aren't just talking about obsolete tech from the 90s. This portfolio includes thousands of patents that are absolutely critical, literally essential, to 5G technology. You can think of this as the patent tax. Because Nokia already spent decades and billions developing this intellectual property, they essentially act as an invisible toll booth on the modern internet. They pull in licensing revenue from competitors across the entire mobile ecosystem. Every time data moves, Nokia is probably taking a cut. And since the heavy lifting of research and development is totally in the rearview mirror, much of that licensing revenue is just pure profit. It's an insanely high-margin business model. To put that ruthless efficiency into perspective, just look at their 2023 numbers. Even while the global telecom equipment market was slowing down pretty significantly, Nokia still turned out $1.8 billion in operating profit. Meanwhile, their closest rival, Ericsson, they actually posted an operating loss. Nokia's strategic web of networks, cloud services, and those invisible patent toll booths gave them unshakable financial stability, even in a really tough market.
Section 4. The Future. Betting on AI networks.
But Nokia isn't just resting on its 5G laurels. They are already gearing up for their next ambitious reinvention, capitalizing on an infrastructure market that's projected to grow by over 25% a year. They're pouring massive investments into something they call physical AI. It's a huge bet that the next generation of connectivity is going to require heavy, foundational AI integration right at the network level.
So the crucial point is how they actually plan to pull this off. And that brings us to AI-RAN, Artificial Intelligence Radio Access Network. Nokia is currently collaborating with Nvidia to build mini data centers directly into base stations to run enterprise applications. Basically, they want to dictate how AI physically moves across the globe. Now, to be fair, this is a highly debated gamble. The broader market is still trying to figure out if there's a viable business case for these mini data centers in the near term, but Nokia doesn't care. They are aiming to literally create the market for AI-RAN. As one of Nokia's own executives pointed out in our source material, the whole future is AI-native networks. They are absolutely convinced that future generations of connectivity are going to be fundamentally different, relying entirely on AI integrated directly into the physical telecommunications infrastructure itself. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question. Nokia went from a 19th century paper mill to the absolute king of mobile phones, to nearly collapsing from their own corporate hubris, to quietly becoming the highly profitable, invisible landlord of modern connectivity. Now they are placing their biggest bet yet. Can the very company that totally missed the smartphone era actually define the future of the AI internet? Time will tell, but if their 160-year history of survival has taught us anything at all, you should never count the invisible landlord out. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the technology around you, and I'll catch you next time.